headlines on this Wednesday, September 21st. Addressing the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, President Yoon Suk-yeol called on members to stand in solidarity to promote peace and protect freedom. And world leaders also took to the UN platform to push for tangible action against climate change and to denounce Russia's assault against Ukraine, calling for an immediate halt. Findings for the first 20 days of September show exports amounting to $32.9 billion and imports to roughly $37 billion, raising the likelihood of a deficit for the sixth straight month. We begin in New York, where world leaders are gathered for the UN General Assembly. In his keynote speech on Tuesday, President Yoon Suk-yeol called for the protection of freedom and promotion of solidarity. My colleague Moon Gon-young, who is part of the Presidential Press Corps, starts us off with his remarks.
Freedom was the overriding theme in South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's maiden speech at the United Nations as he raised the alarm saying freedom is in jeopardy around the world. Standing before the representatives of the 193-member global body, President Yoon urged the global community to stand together and defend the freedom of people across the world.
진정한 자유와 평화는 질병과 기아로부터의 자유, 문맹으로부터의 자유, 에너지와 문화의 결핍으로부터의 자유를 통해 실현될 수 있습니다.
Closing the education gap and fighting infectious diseases, the South Korean leader stressed, requires wealthy nations to share their advanced technologies and innovations with developing countries. And South Korea will not shy away from its due responsibility as a responsible member of the international community. To that end, Yoon pledged $300 million towards the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator, a global initiative to accelerate the development, production, and equitable access to new COVID-19 therapeutics and vaccines, vowed to up its contribution to the global fund to fight against infectious diseases including AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and promised to continue to widely share its advanced digital technology and data and spare no effort in providing support and investing education. Yoon, who was elected earlier this year, acknowledged the threat to humanity posed by nuclear weapons and other WMDs, but made no reference to the threat on South Korea's own doorstep, North Korea. Closing out his 15-minute-long speech, President Yoon made note of the UN's very first mission.
대한민국을 한반도의 유일한 합법 정부로 승인하고 유엔군을 파견하여 대한민국의 자유를 수호한 것이었습니다. 대한민국은 세계 시민의 자유 수호와 확대 그리고 평화와 번영을 위해 유엔과 함께 책임을 다하겠습니다.
Freedom, solidarity, and an increased role by South Korea in maintaining international peace and security. In his UN debut address, President Yoon presented South Korea as one of the world's solution providers to the myriad of challenges facing the world today. And although not mentioned by name, a firm message to North Korea as well. Now, whether that will resonate with the international community, we'll find out in the next few days, weeks, and months to come. Moon Gon-young, Arirang News, New York.
Also on the agenda at the UN General Assembly were climate change and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Our Kim Hyo-sun covers day one of the high-level talks.
In a wide-ranging address to the UN General Assembly, the UN chief reiterated the need for developed countries to impose an extra tax on the profits of fossil fuel firms. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres added Tuesday that the funds should then be directed to countries affected by climate change, as well as households struggling with the cost of living crisis. He also warned that the world is in, quote, great peril and paralyzed. He explained that countries were not ready or willing to tackle the major challenges that threaten the future of humanity and the fate of the planet. However, the UN chief did highlight that there is hope, calling for cooperation and dialogue among countries. Among mounting challenges facing the world, the war in Ukraine looks like dominating this week's UN General Assembly meeting, which has global leaders gathered in person for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic. Leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, slammed Russia, saying that since its invasion of Ukraine, The world has returned to the age of imperialism and colonialism. As Western powers are hoping to use the gathering to convince neutral states to apply more pressure on Moscow, Macron also urged fence-sitters to wake up.
I know that there are countries here that have chosen a form of neutrality in relation to this war, but I want to tell you with honesty today, those who think they are aligned are wrong. They are making a historic error.
The president of Brazil called for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. He stressed that a solution can only be reached through dialogue rather than unilateral sanctions against Russia.
The solution to the conflict in Ukraine will only be achieved through negotiation and dialogue. I make a plea to the parties as well as to the entire international community. Let us not miss any opportunity to end the conflict and ensure peace.
The Turkish leader called for a diplomatic solution that gives Russia and Ukraine a, quote, dignified way out of the crisis sparked by Moscow's invasion. He called on the international community to find a reasonably practical diplomatic solution to end the war, adding that his country will continue to increase its efforts to that end. 김여선, 아리랑 뉴스.
Meanwhile, on the sidelines of the General Assembly, President Yoon Suk-yeol sat down with the head of the UN, Antonio Guterres, to touch upon the threats to peace and stability posed by North Korea. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
The South Korean leader's first UN address did not contain a direct message to North Korea, but meeting UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres after the speech, President Yoon Suk-yeol sent a clear message over the regime's growing nuclear threats.
President Yoon asked the Secretary General to continue his support for a stern response by the international community with one voice in the case of a resumption in nuclear tests or additional nuclear provocations by North Korea. Secretary General Guterres vowed for a clear response by the UN Security Council.
Ensuring South Korea's financial support, Yoon said he believes there will also be financial assistance and investment by the international community toward Pyongyang should it choose a path to openness. The message also echoed during his lunch meeting in New York with former president of the World Bank, Jim Yong Kim. President Yoon added that the history of the Republic of Korea runs parallel to that of the United Nations since its foundation, referring to his earlier speech where he mentioned the UN's mission over 7 decades ago, the approval of the South as the sole legitimate government on the peninsula, and its dedication for peace during the Korean War.
President Yoon said the Republic of Korea is where it is today thanks to such efforts. He promised South Korea will fulfill its responsibility and cooperate with the UN to defend the freedom of the world.
The meeting lasted for about 30 minutes as part of President Yoon's summit diplomacy on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, which is also likely to involve one-on-ones with the leaders of the US and Japan. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Also in New York on Tuesday, speaking with Korean residents there, President Yoon pledged protection against hate crimes and efforts to ensure their rights in America. Do take a listen.
우리 동포들이 혐오 범죄와 차별에 노출되지 않고 안전하게 생활하실 수 있도록 정부 차원에서 최선을 다하겠습니다. 또한 동포들의 권익 신장과 안전을 위해 미 당국의 관심을 촉구할 것입니다.
Anti-Asian hate crimes in the U.S. reportedly jumped by almost 340% last year compared to 2020, with New York City in particular recording a dramatic rise. Here on the local front, interpellation at the Parliament enters a third day on this Wednesday with the focus on economy. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho, Science Minister Lee Jong-ho and Agriculture Minister Chung Hwang-geun are taking questions from lawmakers. Topics include the high inflation, the housing market, the low fertility rate, as well as the repercussions on South Korean EV makers in light of the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, which excludes tax credits for electric vehicles assembled outside of North America. The final interpellation on Thursday will address social and educational matters. Staying at the parliament, during the second day of interpellation on Tuesday, opposition lawmakers took issue with protocols opted by President Yoon Suk-yeol over in London for Queen Elizabeth II's state funeral. Our National Assembly correspondent Lee Kyung-eun explains.
Day 2 into lawmakers grilling government officials. Put on the fire were ministries related to national security and foreign affairs, one of the biggest areas the rival parties have been clashing over lately. Much of the opposition Democratic Party's focus was on President Yoon Suk-yeol canceling the visit to Westminster Hall, part of the Queen's funeral procedure due to traffic. They called it a diplomatic disaster that did harm to national prestige.
It's the government's failure to prepare and arrange in advance. Please admit that.
Everything was pre-arranged with the royals. They asked those who arrived late to pay tribute the next day at the reception. And many at head of state level also signed the book on the same day as President Yoon.
The DEP also brought up the now retracted plans to build a new reception hall as a result of the relocated presidential office.
Is the government thinking of resuming the 80 billion won plan once public sentiment changes?
The plan would be to share the reception hall with ministries and parliament and wouldn't just be for the president. President Yoon has halted the plan for now, since the message was not fully delivered to the public.
With the session coming just 4 months since the Yoon Suk-yeol administration took office, the ruling People Power Party also went on the offensive, targeting the previous liberal Moon Jae-in administration's policies. The security-focused conservatives targeted the past government's North Korean policies amid increasing threats in the wake of Pyongyang enacting a law to allow preemptive nuclear strikes.
South Korea puts a lot of money into its defense, but why are we still under threat?
I do believe that there were some areas where the direction of strengthening the war potential were incorrect.
Meanwhile, as President Yoon travels to the U.S., both parties pressure the government regarding the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, which excludes domestically built electric vehicles from getting tax credits there. The government said it is currently actively pursuing bilateral negotiations. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
The Asian Development Bank on Wednesday cut its 2023 growth outlook for the South Korean economy to 2.3% amid growing concerns of the global economic slowdown. The latest revision is down 0.3 percentage points from its earlier projection in July. As for this year's outlook, the ADB maintained its previous outlook of 2.6%, the same as the Bank of Korea's forecast. Inflation estimates for this year and next have been left unchanged at 4.5% and 3%, respectively. Meanwhile, the ADB slashed its 2022 average growth outlook for 46 developing Asian countries to 4.3% from 4.6%, saying that aggressive monetary tightening by major economies and China's economic downturn will serve as risks for the region. For the first time in 25 years, South Korea's balance of trade this month could be in the red for the 6th straight month. According to the Korea Customs Service on Wednesday, exports during the first 20 days of September amounted to almost $33 billion. Now that's down 8.7% on year, and the agency is linking the drop to fewer working days given the Chuseok holiday this month. Meanwhile, imports over the same period amounted to around $37 billion, up more than 6% on year. To address the prolonged deficit, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho has spoken about earmarking some $9 million of reserve funds for exporters to ease their burden of logistics costs. A regular forum here serves as a platform promoting partnerships between local and foreign entities on the economic front, and its latest gathering had a former trade minister highlighting the importance of secure and reliable trade ties. Our finance ministry correspondent Ji-young was there.
Amid a big paradigm shift in global trade patterns, it's important to keep channels of communication open with the international business community and explore potential areas of cooperation. This was suggested during the Business Plus Forum on Tuesday, co-hosted by South Korea's Trade Investment Promotion Agency KOTRA and the European Chamber of Commerce in Korea. Collaborating with 18 foreign chambers, the monthly forum has been supporting expats, international organizations, and embassies in South Korea to better understand the country's latest economic trends. The highlight of Tuesday's event was former Trade Minister Yoon Hang-gu sharing his views on the latest trends in the global trade and investment environment. He stressed the need for economic security, including closer ties with key partners.
For example, the supply chain resilience, as I said, let's say, semiconductor. Korea and European Union are indispensable. Without ASML, Samsung cannot manufacture any of these, high-end chips. And when Korea was really attacked with this export control measure on these 3 key chemical materials, Korean companies look out to Europe for alternative sources of those high-end chemical materials.
He also emphasized that the free trade agreements should be modernized to meet the latest trends and should include more variables that can affect trade, including supply chain technologies, digitalization, and climate change. And in order to further improve trade conditions and to help some 16,000 foreign investment companies in the country manage risks, KOTRA will continue its initiative.
There are many programs for foreigners here in South Korea, but most of them are about culture or tourism, and not many are about the country's economy or industries. The Business Plus Forum strives to help foreigners do better business in the country because it is not only helpful for them, but also contributes to the development of the Korean economy.
The next runner to jointly hold the Business Plus Forum with KOTRA in October will be the German Chamber of Commerce, featuring sessions regarding the environment, social, and governance.
The fact that this large international group, Samsung Electronics, is sharing its perspective on the topic of ESG will be quite interesting, and then it will help German, European, other companies, foreign companies, to a little bit more understand how Korean companies see it.
He added the Business Plus Forum will lead to a synergy between Korean and foreign firms and create more business opportunities. 엄지영, Arirang News.
Korea's kimchi is taking a road trip nationwide to offer those interested a first-hand experience of making it and tasting it. My colleague Song Yoo-jin has details.
When talking about 한식, or traditional Korean food, you cannot leave out kimchi. With its unique sour and spicy taste from fermented vegetables and seasoning, it's become a soul food for Koreans. And to spread kimchi worldwide, the so-called Kimchi Road Trip kicked off Tuesday. It's part of the 한식 one-day tour for foreigners hosted by the Korean Food Promotion Institute. This hands-on food tour program gives non-Koreans a chance to learn about and experience Korean food like kimchi. I'm here in the Jongno-gu district in central Seoul, where the first leg of the Kimchi Road Trip is taking place. Today's theme is modern kimchi, and I'm going to make kimchi grilled cheese and kimchi butter. Some 20 students learned how to make kimchi in contemporary style from chef Son Jong-won, who owns a modern cuisine restaurant.
So though kimchi is taking a big part of Korean food culture, I think it's still there is certain difficulty to approach. So I wanted to introduce an easier way to approach the kimchi. So I made these 2 dishes to share. Yes. Stacking caramelized kimchi, cheese, and gochujang butter made from red pepper paste with bread gives you a kimchi sandwich. Grinding butter with kimchi gives you kimchi butter ready to be pasted on your steak. Participants were mesmerized by the easy-to-make but delicious dishes.
I thought it's difficult, but it's not. It's very simple, and I had the recipe, and if you follow the chef, it's easy. So I think I can go home and cook it for my friends and family, and it will be an amazing experience.
I was especially surprised by the fusion of Korean ingredients with I would say more Western food, like butter and sourdough bread. But I was really surprised how well they both mix and make a delicious meal.
The 4-part tour will run across the country until early October. Those who wish to sign up can do so at the Korean Food Promotion Institute's website. Reservation fee is 20,000 Korean won, which is around $14, but will be fully refunded upon participation. 송유진, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the Caribbean, Hurricane Fiona has caused widespread damage to the region. The storm has been making its way across the Caribbean since Sunday and has killed at least 5 people. Damage reports from Tuesday show that over 80% of Puerto Rico's 3.1 million residents are without power, and around a quarter of the population have had their water cut. The Dominican Republic is also seeing blackouts for 700,000 homes and businesses, while more than 1 million people have no running water. 12,000 people there have been displaced, 3,000 homes have been damaged, and 4 bridges have collapsed. The devastation comes amid flooding and landslides triggered by up to 760 millimeters of rain across both Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. Meanwhile, Fiona has since grown into a more powerful Category 3 storm with continuous wind speeds of 185 kilometers per hour. It is forecast to intensify over the next few days and is now affecting the Turks and Caicos Islands. At least 3 people have been killed in Iran amid nationwide protests against the country's strict morality laws. Tuesday marks the 4th day of protests over the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who died after being detained by Iran's morality police for not dressing appropriately. After being sent to a guidance center, she collapsed into a 3-day coma and died on Friday. Rallies in Iran have seen women burning their headscarves in protest and have led to a heavy response by security forces. 3 deaths at the protests were confirmed by a regional governor who claimed they were killed by anti-establishment elements. However, a Kurdish rights group says 5 people were killed after security forces opened fire on protesters. A murder conviction from 2000 has been overturned by a U.S. judge after the case received renewed attention. Adnan Syed was sentenced to life in prison for the 1999 murder of his ex-girlfriend, Hae-Min Lee, in Baltimore. But prosecutors asked for the conviction to be annulled after a year-long review revealed 2 other suspects not previously ruled out. Renewed interest in the case was sparked by a widely popular podcast episode that called his verdict into question. The overturning, however, does not prove Syed's innocence. Instead, the judge on Monday ordered a new trial and released the 41-year-old into home detention. And finally, after cancelling its 2022 broadcast, the Golden Globes is set to return. NBC made the announcement on Tuesday saying the Film and TV Awards show will take place on January 10, 2023. It comes after the 2022 awards show was cancelled after an investigation found that the group responsible for handing out the awards, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, had no black representation among its 89 members. Some of the members were also accused of asking for favors from studios and celebrities. Hollywood studios and actors had planned to boycott the event over the ethics issues and lack of voter diversity. The association has since introduced new ethics guidelines and added 103 new voters from 62 countries. The voting body is now 52% female and more ethnically diverse. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Wednesday afternoon. I hope you packed a light jacket. It was rather chilly this morning with even a single-digit low in Taegwallyeong in Gangwon-do province. But things have turned around, with the high in Seoul jumping to 25 degrees for a wide gap in readings. And it's a great day to bask in plenty of sunshine. But remember to put on your sunblock thoroughly, as the UV index is going to be high across the country, even very high in southern regions. And be mindful of high surf and rip currents along the shoreline. Please avoid going to dangerous areas. And overall, the air quality is quite good. It doesn't feel that hot, Highs are just below 25 degrees in most regions with low humidity. But again, be aware of volatile temperature changes into the evening and dress accordingly. Sunshine will dominate throughout this week, except for rain on Friday in central regions, which could be accompanied by stormy conditions. Now, let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
That ends this edition of the Daily Report, but do stay tuned for our new daily panel discussion show coming your way right after this break. Thank you for now.